Peanuts are not nuts. They're legumes. A tomato is not a vegetable, despite what you were told. It is fruit. And a fig, well, what is a fig anyway? How many of you eat figs? How many of you have never eaten a fig in your life? Yeah. How many of you, well, you've all had fig Newtons at least. That's a good thing. You know, when I lived in Pennsylvania, I lived about 10 miles west of Breezewood, which was where three major interstates met. And Bruce Maxwell, my friend Bruce Maxwell, was head of Trucker Traveler Ministry, a ministry to truckers and travelers, often rescuing people in times of need, providing spiritual counsel, free Bibles, and also, if a trucker found out that because of bad weather or some other factor, they were going to arrive too late with their truck load to the store and it was going to be rejected, they'd give it to Bruce. And Bruce would distribute it among the churches or to the food bank or other things. So one time he gave us a call and he had a whole load of figs, fresh figs, which I love. You know, but a fresh fig, you might kind of have a green or a purple skin on it, depending which kind it is. And inside is that delicious fruit, but you don't know, am I supposed to bite it? Am I supposed to peel it? And how do I eat it? And, you know, this place I lived in Pennsylvania, one time somebody had to bring a load of avocados because they didn't get it to the market in time. And it was taken to the food bank, and people looked at these avocados and said, what am I supposed to do, fry this thing? I mean, they never saw anything that wasn't hamburger. You know, for them, a vegetarian was somebody that ate chicken. So anyway, yeah, we had this whole load of figs that nobody wanted, and Jenny made fig jam. It's just great stuff. I just can't say how much I love it, but as I said, peanuts are not nuts, they're legumes. A tomato is not a vegetable, it is a fruit. And a fig is not a fruit, it's a flower. The petals don't go out, they go in. But if you ever cut open a fig, you can see, and there are layers, the petals. Now, normally a flower is open. By the way, just for those of you that aren't sure about figs, Jenny and I took a package of figs and cut them in half, and they're on a plate there at the fellowship hall. So you can either try it or look at it and say, yuck, I'm not eating that. Then we'll know what state you're from. Anyway, the fig has to be pollinated, like all flowers, but it's closed up. So how does it get pollinated? And this is essential to our Bible story, by the way. Well, most figs are pollinated by tiny wasps. The wasp burrows inside, leaves its eggs, and dies. The eggs hatch, and all the new figs kind of unburrow their way out and fly off to live fruitful lives, but almost every fig has a wasp mummy on the inside. I've looked and I've never found it, but I'm told it's there. So that's kind of like your Cracker Jacks box. Will you be the one with the treasure? Wow. As I said, there's method in my madness here this morning. Jesus is going to tell a story about figs, but first, he stopped because people are inundated by current events. I mean, nothing's happening this weekend, right? We're not worried about any breaking news or what might be in any report that might suddenly be announced. So we're not waiting and checking our phones to say, I wonder what's going to come up any second now. No. Well, if you were like me, you had plenty to keep you busy at other things over the course of the weekend. But it's easy to become enslaved to current events and also try to think that there is some eternal meaning to every single thing that happens. And so people come up to Jesus and they've asked him, and remember, Jesus is a Galilean, about those troublesome Galileans who evidently created some kind of revolt or political unrest. And in order to put a stop to this nonsense, Pontius Pilate, the governor, had them murdered while they were at church, while they were offering sacrifices, while they were worshiping. Probably because they didn't have any weapons at that point. Pontius Pilate was a great example of what in the 60s we referred to as the Peter Principle. You may or may not have read that book in the 60s. I did. I was in high school, but I read all kinds of books. Lawrence J. Peter wrote a book in which he said what happens in companies is if somebody is moderately good at what they do, they get a promotion. And if they're good at that, they get a promotion. And if they're good at that, they get a promotion. And then if they're incompetent at that, they're stuck doing a job they hate very poorly. But it's hard to demote them. And you certainly don't promote them. So his point was that in many American companies at that time, people were reaching their level of incompetence and stopping there. And Pilate seems to have been a moderately successful governor in places that were placid and calm. Kind of like being appointed ambassador to Ireland or England or France or someplace we're not really at war with. Those ambassadorships are handed out to people with no diplomatic experience. But a person like that should not be appointed ambassador to one of the trouble spots in the world. And Pilate seems to have been good at being an ambassador to England or France. But when he was moved up and found himself in Judea, he proved to be totally incapable. The first thing he did upon coming to Jerusalem was to display the Imperial Eagle, which was on display everywhere in the Roman Empire. But not in Jerusalem, not in Judea, not in Galilee. Why? Because of the second commandment. You will have no graven images before me. Well, he decided to ignore it. By golly, if it's good enough for one place, it's good enough for all. And so he put it on display. Immediately, residents of Jerusalem came to the city square, placed their swords against their necks, and threatened to all kill themselves in a mass suicide if it was not taken down immediately. It was taken down, but he resented that. Evidently here, we have other instances. We don't know exactly about this incident, but many where he responded by slaughtering people if he had a chance of killing them without any danger to himself. So here, these Galileans were killed, and the response to some people is, if bad things happen to them, they must have deserved it. If somebody gets sick, they must have deserved it. If, Kate Bowles, who wrote the book, Everything Happens for a Reason and Other Lies I Used to Love, in which she talks about her stage 4 cancer and how people came to her door to tell her that this was God punishing her for her sins. Describes that people will say all kinds of things that are irrational and stupid and don't reflect who God is. And here these people assume the Galileans must have done something bad or they wouldn't have been murdered. And Jesus' response is, they were no different than anybody else. But any one of us could be called before the heavenly judge at any time, whether it's our fault or not. And the real question is, are you ready today? And then he goes further and gives, like a fig, he's enfolding flowers, he's enfolding petals, one within the other. He goes on to another, before they can ask another question, he says, how about those people that were just standing there minding their own business when this tower fell down and killed 18 of them? Do you imagine that they were worse than anybody else? Trust me, there are people who think that those who die in car accidents die for a reason, a divine reason, that God had a purpose, when we cannot imagine why indeed that would happen. It may simply have happened. And Jesus reminded us once again, you never know. Now, these two stories of warning might get you on edge. I never know. But then Jesus gives us a third story, in this case a parable. The other two are breaking news. Here comes a parable to give us some hope. This is what's nestled in the middle of the flower that blossoms last. He tells us about a man who plants a vineyard. Vineyards are very important. Remember, water may not be safe to drink in a big city, so the wine is a purer drink to drink at that time. Plus, it preserves the fruit a lot longer. Plus, people just like to eat grapes. Well, the soil that suits a vineyard may not suit a fig tree, but the man has planted a fig tree because you never know. As he says, he might be walking through the field and he feels like eating a fig. Figs provide protein and high amounts of sugar for animals and humans throughout most of the world. They are an essential part of people's diets. We don't have to eat figs because we got candy. Right now you're thinking, oh, I wish I could unrustle that piece of candy in my pocket or my purse. Now that you mentioned candy, I've got one. But hold on just a little bit longer. So anyway, the fig tree is there. The soil for a vineyard may not be ideal for a fig tree. But this man expects to find figs. Not only that, but you remember, how do those figs get pollinated? By a certain kind of wasp. And depending on the kind of fig tree, it's a different kind of wasp. What if that year there are no wasps? There will be no fruit. You know, we all have experience in gardens and in orchards. Sometimes you can't believe how big the tomatoes are or how beautiful the apples are. But a lot of years, there's nothing. I think in our 12 years we were here in Indiana the first time, there was only one time we could go pick apricots in Michigan. We kept thinking, oh, apricots, because we always get fresh apricots in the Central Valley of California. You know, drive up there on our way to Oregon and put a big lug in the back seat of the car with the kids, and all of us be just sick by the time we arrived at Oregon 7 hours later, and wishing that Jenny would drive a little faster. You know, and so some years, it just doesn't happen. And this man, 3 years in a row, he's been picking figs and nothing's there. He's tending the grapevines. He's looking at them before he tells the gardener to do more work. So we don't know if it is the fig tree's fault that there are no figs. But he's had it. Cut it down. Just like maybe our lives haven't been very fruitful the last couple of years because we've had our share of problems. Health-wise or financial or just all the press of work or friends or neighbors or family. It just hasn't been a time for us to be fruitful. Cut it down. Well, here's where we get the hope, because here comes the gardener. And I got a feeling the gardener is Jesus. Now, he's not going to give us unlimited time, but he says, let's give it one more year. Now, the way it sounds in this passage is, I'm going to put manure on it. And, you know, we think of somebody getting the shovel and being very careful and patting it down with the shovel. That's not what the Greek word is. The Greek word is ekbalo. You hear the word ball as in throw. You know, that's where we get the word ball from the verb for throw. But ekbalo means fling. In other words, he's going to get his hands dirty with the manure. He's not just going to go, ooh, I hope this tree works good. He's going to get down and dirty and fling it there and work it in, and, you know, that's who God is. God's concern for us is such that God will get hands dirty. God's not sitting there on the sidelines going, well, I hope they do okay. Be nice, but I'll see. Jesus wanted us to see the gardener, the towering gardener, the hopeful gardener, the gardener who's on our side, being willing to give us another year, another decade, another moment, and that Jesus has the sweat equity to get his hands really mucky in order to give us a chance. That's who's on our side. Not somebody who goes, nice job, but who says, you buy that blanket, I have a disaster where I've got people ready to go. God is moving people around the board at all times. If you're willing, to work hard on the chicken noodle supper, I've got people that have lost a loved one that I'm sending there because they need the comfort of what you're serving. If you are willing to be open to answering the call of disaster relief, I will walk beside you when you go. If you go sit with someone in the nursing home, even though you don't like to go to nursing homes, I am there with you. God is Lord not only of the earth and the sky, God is Lord of time. When Jesus is put on trial, we sense Pilate, who has reached his level of incompetence, being very puzzled. Why have they brought him here? What's going on? Is he really guilty? My wife had a dream about him. What do I do? And, asking dumb questions like, what is truth, at a time when a man stands in danger of being nailed to wood and being left up there to die? And in the end, he just makes a decision. Jesus, when they bring him the woman caught in adultery, saying, oh, by the way, what do you think it says in the law? Do we kill her right now, all of us throwing rocks at her until she's dead? Or do we let her go, despite what the Bible says? You know what Jesus does? They want an answer, and he kneels down and he writes in the sand. He says, I'm not on your time. I'm going to take time to think. And Jesus never does address that question directly about whether the biblical law means that they need to all grab a stone and dash this woman's brains out and leave her broken body there in the town square until somebody feels like cleaning it up. No, Jesus says, who's ever without sin, cast the first stone. Get back to me on that, will you? And then he goes and writes in the dirt again, so there's time for people to leave. We have no time to think because we don't take time to think. We give other people no chance when we ought to give them another year and put our own love and energy into it. Now, Jesus says, oh, give them another year. I don't want you to take that year literally, but what he's saying is, in the end, I will give you time, but there may be a limit to time. All of us have a little more time. All of us have this moment to consider who is Lord of heaven and earth and time, and who we will serve. Earthly authorities or God? Next time you hear the word breaking news, go ahead and watch if you want. But remember, the real news is God loves us enough to get hands dirty and filthy in order to give us a chance. Next time somebody asks you a question that has no right answer because they want to trap you, take a step back and don't play the game. The next time somebody's really quick to condemn another, don't join in, but instead say, I am with God. I am with the gardener. And if you're not sure who the gardener is, remember this story and help them out.